Hey everyone, welcome to the Redmen TV. As we continue to wait for the Reds to get back in pre-season action, we are looking ahead to the new season and Liverpool's new manager, Arne Slot. To get more information about the new head coach of the Reds, Dan spoke to Andy Brassell, European football expert, and started by asking Andy if he was surprised that Liverpool chose to go for the Dutchman.
I wouldn't say I'm completely blown away out of left field because he is a coach who's been in the orbit of Premier League clubs and big Premier League clubs for a while. Of course, he was really close to going to Spurs last summer, made the decision to stay at Feyenoord, and we'll come back to why in a minute, I think. But yeah, he's someone who's been doing the rounds. And I think when you look at the coaches that are up for the biggest jobs that are available in club football, the biggest of which is definitely available is Liverpool, you would have to say, for the moment, especially with Xavi going back and staying at Barcelona. It's the fact that, and this is exactly the way that appointments should be done, the conversation we're having is less around results. Is something I said on the On the Continent podcast today. The conversation is less around results and more around philosophies. Now, obviously, Arne Slot's results speak for themselves over the last couple of years. But also, I think it is a case of the sort of football that Liverpool want to play, the sort of players they want to develop, an acknowledgement that this season, well, certainly from the outside, I don't know how you feel as a Liverpool fan, but it feels like way above expectation to me, at least until you come up to like the last week or two. So it's about really continuing that sort of progression. And Slot, as well as being very successful, as we'll come to in a minute, he's a developer and redeveloper of teams. Now, that's what you have to be in Dutch football, because budget is what it is in the modern world, and your best players will get sold out from under you. So you could look at for example, Orhan Koçu going to Benfica last summer, and that is where Dutch clubs are at. Your best players can get pinched by the giants of Portugal, never mind the giants of England or Spain. So he's had to build and rebuild. And the way that Liverpool do their business, they're not Manchester City, are they? They have a completely more organic and hand on the tiller way of doing things under FSG, and that's fine. I think that's their way, and they should stick to it. So whether that's deciding when Coutinho's reached his maximum value, when it's the moment to let Mane go, that moment might appear with Salah in the near future. Who knows? Those are the sort of challenges that he will be having to undertake. Obviously, the difference is that Jurgen Klopp arrived and he was going to be expected to challenge for the league at some point. Now, he's raised the bar to the extent that Slot, presumably, will be expected to at least be in the mix for the Premier League title straight away.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that. And as you say, I want to come on to it a little bit later, but I think it's interesting how it looks as though he is relishing the opportunity to jump at this challenge, which not all managers will be, I think it's fair to say, because being the guy to follow the guy, as we've seen with Arsenal, Manchester United, isn't straightforward at all. So I want to touch on that in terms of his personality a little bit later. But you loosely mentioned there his body of work, obviously at AZ Alkmaar previously, a little bit of a caretaker stint even prior to that, and obviously what he's done at Feyenoord. I mean, just how impressive is it? Because I've seen a lot of people in the past few days sort of suggesting he's upset the natural order a little bit in Holland, albeit Feyenoord the Giants, maybe not Ajax or PSV level. So that feels like a big tick in the box.
Yeah, it does. And I think you're right to mention AZ when you go back before Feyenoord, because, of course, they easily could have won the league in the COVID season when the league was stopped, and in common with France, it was just definitively stopped, and there wasn't a league title awarded in the case of the Netherlands in the Eredivisie. So they were level on points with Ajax at this time, and that's not Ajax now, bad Ajax. That was really good, just come off the back of the Champions League semi-final and the brink of the final Ajax, where of course they could have been playing Liverpool in the final in Madrid. So that was an amazing achievement in itself. There was a bit of kerfuffle with his move to Feyenoord because AZ weren't happy about that at all. And it added a little bit of extra pressure to him, and he dealt with it. He dealt with it brilliantly. To win the league, if you're not Ajax and PSV, requires beating Ajax and PSV, who have greater resource than Feyenoord. Feyenoord's academy is brilliant, but it never even gets the props of the toekomst that Ajax won. Of course, is less fashionable, a bit like Rotterdam next to Amsterdam, I suppose. So for him to go there and win the title was amazing. And to show that little bit of extra ambition, I think showed two things. Firstly, that he really believed in the Feyenoord project and his ability to progress the team. I think he had half an eye on how bad Ajax were going to be this season, because whereas that may have surprised the world at large, and maybe it's been surprising quite how bad it's been. I think a lot of people could see it coming, that they were a bit of a mess. And as I've said on the continent, in any normal season this season, Feyenoord repeat, they win the league. Their record's brilliant, and they've just come up against an outstanding PSV side under Peter Bosz, which is a surprise to a lot of people. But yeah, they've been peerless, really. So I think it shows that, but also it shows an enormous amount of confidence that Slot has in himself, because to turn down a job like Spurs, I don't think a lot of coaches would have done that in the Eredivisie. You see the money, you see the project, you see the possibility of a bit of leeway at Spurs, being able to, hoped for that you qualify for the Champions League, but you get to develop your philosophy, get people on side with your sort of football, which is exactly the opportunity that Ange Postecoglou has received quite willingly, for example. But for Slot to say, you know what, I'm in my mid-40s, I'm good enough that I'll get another job offer, and I'll get as good, or if not better, a job offer down the line. And so obviously it's 2020 hindsight and all that, but for him to make that decision, I think shows quite a lot of bravery and shows huge confidence in his own ability and his own philosophy of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely does. Yeah, and you've just said it there, leads us nicely on to the next question, really. You said the word philosophy. What would you say it was his philosophy? What is his play style? I mean, so often when we talk about managers, what brand of football do they play? But how do you reckon Arne Slot will be looking to sort of implement things and system-wise, stuff like that? I mean, a lot of what's been made of sort of the move away from Amorim is because he wanted a bit of a non-negotiable on the 3-4-3, and it feels like Arne Slot would be quite happy to bring a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much a case of rather than the system itself, how the players you have interpret it. I mean, that's something that Xabi Alonso is always very big on. He's like, well, I've got a structure, but it's the players that are going to interpret their roles, and I think that's the way you have to look at it, really. I think when you see the way Feyenoord play and you see the way Sporting play, they're both quite applicable to Liverpool, I think. So I'm not convinced that Amorim turns up and says, right, we're definitely playing 3-4-3. He's far more of a player's coach than that. So whereas it is his preferred system, you think even someone who's seen as quite dogmatic, like Antonio Conte, he has changed the shape of his team throughout his career. He started out sort of almost a 4-2-4 and then got more attached to the three at the back when he was at Juventus. I think the best managers can adapt to those situations, and Amorim's going to be in that bracket. But in terms of Slot, it feels like less of a leap from what Liverpool are doing at the moment. So if you can have that rough 4-3-3, which is Dutch football all over, and really go from there, I think the fact that he wants his teams to be aggressive, and it sounds like a sort of tenuous point to make, but I'm gonna make it anyway. The fact that if you think of how English football is played, is traditionally quite governed by the crowd. The fact that we cheer clearances and we cheer tackles and all that sort of stuff that they don't really do in other countries. I think if you look at the way that Anfield crowd, it's not just a Klopp thing. I think if you go back to the best of Brendan Rodgers, even the way that Liverpool tear into teams from the beginning, just at home, is dictated by the Anfield crowd. So you can talk about styles of different coaches and their philosophies. I think it all has to lean into that. It does have to lean into that. And that's why it's really important for Liverpool to pick the right coach. Now, if you go and see Feyenoord at home, De Kuip is unbelievably atmospheric. I'm sure you can have a great time at Ajax or PSV, but Feyenoord is the one for that atmosphere that just hits different. And I think it's the same with Anfield. And I think Slot will walk in there for the first time and go, yeah, okay, the crowd's going to do some more work for me here. They're going to get my team starting the game the way I want them to start. Now, just because he is front foot, it doesn't mean his teams can't defend. The Feyenoord defence the last couple of seasons has been really, really good. And, I've heard the comparison made with Erik ten Hag, for example. And if you look at Ten Hag and a couple of the problems that he's encountered at Manchester United, now clearly a couple of them are structural problems, management problems, recruitment problems, stuff that goes way over his head. But in terms of, even when they were doing well last season, how United, when they got beaten, they often got absolutely thrashed. I don't know if you remember one or two of those. But I think that was quite foreseeable because his last 6 months at Ajax, the defence fell to bits and he didn't really have an answer for it. Now, I think Slot's Feyenoord have been way more consistent than that. So in terms of them being able to defend aggressively as well as attack aggressively, I think that's quite a positive thing. Now clearly, there's a bit of a leap between Eredivisie and the Premier League, something that's probably more intensely felt by players. And I think if you look at the top of the league and you think, the Premier League is a super league of coaches now, it's a big step for anyone. But if you look at coaches like Ange Postecoglou, Roberto De Zerbi to a different extent, coaches with ideas and philosophy, there is always room for them to succeed in the Premier League. And I don't really see why it should be any different for him.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit. I'm going to touch on it now while we've got the point raised, really, is that translation from Eredivisie to the Premier League. And you made the point there, obviously, it feels like a big leap for players and you're right, coaches, their ideas, they're able to implement their style should be quite an easy transition, really. Do you see it that way, I guess?
It's not easy, but it's definitely doable. And I think often when you see coaches come from a league that's certainly less intense than the Premier League, you think, okay, here's a step up, and this is going to be something in terms of preparing the team tactically. But I think there are two things really with this. Firstly, he's been in charge of teams that haven't been the absolute favourites. But secondly, he's had a little bit of the feeling of the other side, because Feyenoord as champions have been there to be shot at this season. And globally, they've dealt with that really, really well in a competitive league. And, we talk about thrashings before. And if you go back a couple of weeks and see them absolutely dismantling Ajax at De Kuip, I mean, it's quite similar to the Manchester United situation, I suppose. The fact that yes, it is a weakened rival, but it's still a rival. It's still a massive game. And there's not a sense of, okay, right, we're going to score a couple of goals and then let's just shut up shop. It's right, okay, let's seize the moment. Let's be brave. Let's absolutely tear them to bits and make this afternoon ours and make this an afternoon that our supporters are going to remember forever. And I think that sort of controlled adrenaline is something that Slot does very well. Now, also, I guess if we're looking at him in terms of how he will relate to the media and the supporters, it's been brought up a few times since the speculation's risen in recent days about his sort of spat with Jose Mourinho, which it was quite funny, actually. So he sort of sat there before Feyenoord played Roma in the Europa League, and they've played them three times in a row. So obviously Conference League final, 2022. Then they got knocked out by Roma, who got all the way to the final in the Europa League last year. Then they went out on pens to them this year. So it's been quite an interesting, bubbling European rivalry at the sort of second tier. And Slot said, well, like, to be honest, he was asked about Mourinho's philosophy, and he said, honestly, I'd prefer to watch Napoli or City. That would be more my cup of tea. And obviously, this was red rag to a bull, and Mourinho was not happy with this at all. And they sort of got into it. But I think he was just honest, and he didn't back down at all. So, like, we've seen certain coaches in Premier League situations, naming no names, that when they wander in, and it was really wandering into a sort of controversy, like mini war of words like that, you know, they don't really know where to put themselves. I think the fact that he kept his composure throughout that, you know, in the face of one of the most famous managerial / coaching names of all time, was very impressive. And I think shows how he will be able to handle these sort of situations. And I think in the English game, that matters more than anywhere else, really, because I still think we prefer pithy lines in press conferences to tactics. And you have to be able to handle that, because it can really adjust the momentum of the Premier League season, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, you can. Yeah, we'll carry on that vein in that case then, because personality was one of the topics I was going to sort of quiz you on, because we often lauded Jurgen Klopp for his ability to he got this unique ability to find the right words in press conferences, no matter what the topic it feels like, sometimes not even related to football, to be honest with you. There was the Super League debacle and all that stuff as well that he handled expertly. I mean, Arne Slot, does he have similar traits? And I guess as well, the press had seemingly warmed to Jurgen Klopp. We as a fan base most definitely have as well. And I've spoken to João Carlos Teixeira yesterday, who played a little bit under Arne Slot, and he spoke really fondly of him. Does he have that sort of impression to you? Does it feel like everyone sort of likes him? Is he that kind of character?
Well, look, his players love him. But like I said, he's not scared of pinning his colours to the mast either. So I think that's really important. I think the other important thing, though, is to manage expectation. In terms of personality, Liverpool cannot help but miss Jurgen Klopp. You can think of any coach in the world that you can invite to be Liverpool coach, and it wouldn't even come close. And I think it's all right to have a little period of mourning. You could argue that Dortmund have been having that for 12 years, really. Well, not 12 years since they last won the league, but 8 years since he went, because Thomas Tuchel turned up and to replace him. Great coach, but just emotionally, it didn't quite click with Dortmund. Now, Dortmund is a little bit like Liverpool in that sense, in that, you know, people need to get it. People really need to get it. And, you know, I think it's the same with players too. I mean, thinking about Fernando Torres and how he was such an instant hit. Obviously, it ended a little bit differently with Torres, but I had the feeling that he understood Liverpool straight away. And I think the fans had that feeling as well. And that's enormously important. And I think especially with Slot, as I said, not just his ability to relate to players, but to understand what the fans would like to see. I think that's really, really important.
Interesting, yeah. You're absolutely spot on, and make you right about sort of getting the buy-in from the fan base. You're halfway, you're winning the battle straight away. If not, you're in for it's a bit of a baptism of fire at Liverpool if you don't quite get that. And as much as
with Klopp, I mean, it bought him time at the beginning, didn't it?
Exactly.
Because you know, you had a few like snarky sort of articles after his first year going, oh, well, actually, if you look at it point for point, he didn't do any better than Brendan Rodgers did in his last year. It's never really about that, was it? I think people understood that there was a bit of a mountain to climb, a bit of a rebuild to be done. But it reminds me of something that I often cite that Lenny Lawrence said when the old like Charlton and Middlesbrough manager, when he was manager at Middlesbrough, he said, if you can like just be nice to the press and to the fans, it'll buy you 6 extra weeks when you're struggling. And that is the difference between you being a success at a club and not being a success at a club, really, isn't it?
No, absolutely. Yeah. And if he goes to the other end of the spectrum, I don't want to sort of do him down because it's not the form which to do so. But if he goes to Roy Hodgson, who never really got that and therefore never really was allowed the time, I mean, what he did compared to what Jurgen Klopp did, they just paled into insignificance, basically. And I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at. And that's why, well, there's lots of reasons why it didn't work, but that's certainly one of them. Just onto it then. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier on about recruitment being obviously a key part of his job final because of the fact he loses key players all the time. You also touched upon developing players. Now we've seen the fruits of Liverpool's academy really come to the fore this season. So that feels like it's going to be a big part of his role at Liverpool as well. You know, harnessing the talents of like Jayden Danns, Conor Bradley, Joel Quansah, Bobby Clark, the list goes on. And he's clearly quite adept at doing so.
Yeah, he is, and you know he's had to be, and it's something that he has in common with Ruben Amorim. Actually, you know, they're both at clubs, Slot and Amorim, where the academy is sacrosanct. You can't not bring up players through the academy, and it's not just a financial thing. It is a financial thing as well, obviously, because as we said with Feyenoord and Sporting, they're not the richest clubs in their division. They have clubs with bigger budgets above them that they have to try and outmaneuver and outthink. But obviously, in terms of creating a collective philosophy, it's something that can be to your advantage. Feyenoord's academy is never given the props, as I said, that Ajax's has, but the amount of players it has produced for the Netherlands national team is absolutely unbelievable. It's incredible. Like loads of them have been through the Feyenoord Academy. And I think that's really important. Now, I guess the way this season has gone for Liverpool, especially with that bit around sort of January, February, March, it's a huge advantage actually to whoever takes it on, because however this season ends, a lot of the work for the successor has been done. This is not David Moyes taking over Manchester United, because firstly, he's presuming it's going to be Slot inheriting a team that's in pretty good nick, even if it needs a bit of fine tuning. You've got a rebuild at least half done already. You've got new management in place that are going to support him, with Michael Edwards, who knows the place, and Richard Hughes, who's brilliant at his job and has been for like 10 years. So Slot can just get on with coaching the team. And then you look at these players who, like you've mentioned, you know, Conor Bradley, Jayden Danns, etc., who have had 6 months that they wouldn't have expected at the start of the season. So 6 months more to bed in and really hit next season running like their first team players already, because they are first team players already. And that makes an enormous difference. And yeah, whoever gets the job, this last 6 months for Liverpool, even if it's been difficult at times, it is enormously advantageous to the person following on from Klopp.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, if you look at Liverpool's squad now, and obviously, you know, we're ahead of the summer at this point, so who knows how this will look come August time. But as it stands right now, are there any players you can sort of pick out in that squad that might be particularly standing to benefit from Slot's methods? And can you sort of individuate Darwin Núñez? I know he's got a Mexican striker at the minute at Feyenoord who seems to be flourishing. Is there anyone you can look at and go, I reckon Arne Slot will really get the best out of him? Not to say Klopp hasn't done, but is there anyone in mind?
Well, it does feel that Darwin needs a bit of help. Like everyone knows the ability's in there, and everyone knows that he can score goals because he's proven it at Champions League level before. But in terms of being a consistent finisher, the work that Slot has done with Santi Jimenez is amazing, really. He's turned him into a really, really valuable asset. If he can do that with Darwin, I can't put into words how valuable that'll be to Liverpool. You know, if you could guarantee 25 a season from Darwin, you're away. You know, it's solved a lot of Liverpool's issues. Not that they have that many, but, you know, it would be a massive thing. And, you know, to have that person who scores 25, 30 goals has not been the case this season. So that would maybe make a difference, especially with, if you're looking at the title race next season, that's a problem that Arsenal will be looking to address. And if they fall short, they'll probably look at that bit either side of Christmas where the goals weren't exactly flowing. And maybe they haven't got that natural number 9 in inverted commas. I think Conor Bradley as well. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold, it'd be really interesting to see how he uses him and how they'll maybe fit Bradley and TAA into the same team if they're both fit, and maybe they will fit them into the same team. Obviously, there have been some hints towards that in terms of how Trent has been used for England. But really, it feels like the midfield is the area that is going to get the most work, and it should, because to me, as I say, as an outsider, it's remarkable to me how good the results have been for Liverpool, given the degree of surgery that was done on that midfield, which was overdue, but still, losing 4 or 5 midfielders and bringing another 4 or 5 in, that's kind of unprecedented for a European club of that level, that's often in the back end of the Champions League and challenging for the title. Mm-hmm. So I think to say that the rebuild has started is clear, but also to get Liverpool as good as they can be, there's still quite a lot of work to do. And I think that's what makes next season so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really fascinating summer coming up as well. I think you're absolutely spot on. And on that exact note, before we wrap up, I just got to ask you, if there's anyone you'd sort of suggest, because how often do we see a manager linked? It was the same with Ruben Amorim, and you're immediately linked with 3 or 4 of the players that he currently owns. It was Gonzalo Inacio, Diamande at Sporting, of course. Now, it's more the Eredivisie, it's more final. Is there anyone in that league that you'd look at and go, tell you what, it'd be primed to come over to the Premier League and join Liverpool, and it would really suit Slot and stuff like that?
For me, the obvious one would be Lucio Gutuida. I think he's a terrific defender. He can do right back. He could do centre back. Maybe eventually you could develop him into that sort of Fabinho type holding midfielder. I don't know, but if I looked at the Liverpool squad and thought, where are they looking for the most reinforcement, I would think in central defence straight away. And Gutuida has been really good to propel himself in double quick time into the Netherlands team. Obviously, Van Dijk will know him quite well as well. So that's the obvious one to me. Obviously, there are other people who would say Santi Jimenez, for example, and I don't think that would be a bad signing by any stretch of the imagination. But for me, Gutuida is the one who could go all the way to the top, and okay. I'd be really interested to see how he got on at Liverpool.